my name's Jade and today I'm going to be going over the books that I read in April. I read 11 books in April. Right, let's see if I can break this down. 2 non-fiction, 1 novella, 1 graphic novel, and 1 like children's picture book type situation. Like 6 books then? Anyway, let's get away from the maths and get into the books. The first book I finished this month was Reckless Girls by Rachel Hawkins. This is my first Rachel Hawkins book. I know she wrote Rebel Belle, the Rebel Belle trilogy. And then she, within the last chunk of years or so, started writing adult thrillers. The first one was The Wife Upstairs, which is like a Jane Eyre retelling that I actually really want to read. But Reckless Girls is my first. I listened to this one via audiobook and it was narrated by Barry Krennic. It's about, so, what's the narrator's name? It doesn't even say the narrator's name in there. It's like trying to sell it that it's from the point of view of a group of different people. But really there's like a main character that we're following more than everyone else. Like it isn't an even split. It doesn't feel that way when you're reading it. So it was like Babe or something. It was something like Uncommon, I remember. Lux, okay. And her boyfriend, they are currently living in Hawaii. They bump into these 2 younger women and they want to travel off to this mysterious island. I believe it's called Monroe Island. They, you know, have a boat. Her boyfriend has a boat. There are strangers already at the island and then they form this kind of big group and then mysterious stuff starts happening. It's supposed to be like a mystery thriller type book, but it really doesn't feel like it. And I read a lot of reviews that also agreed that it doesn't feel like a mystery thriller. I like that setup and that premise, you know, a bunch of like strangers on this mysterious island. It's very like tropical vibes, but like with like this almost sinister undertone obviously, and they all have like secrets in their past and we're jumping back and forwards in time. It didn't feel like a mystery. Like there wasn't a lot that you're trying to like guess what's happening. I guess like the only thing you could be guessing is like what happened in their past and how it's going to connect with their present. But like I wasn't that interested in that side of it. I don't know. I mean, I bounced between enjoying it because I still liked the vibes, I liked the premise, I liked what it was trying to do, but then I'd get bored inevitably. I think the characters they were quite surface level. And again, I liked this kind of, none of them were good. All of them were very morally grey, very questionable in their own ways. And a lot of them, you know, come from money and expect certain things. And then you have characters who, you know, don't come from money and then judge the characters that do come from money. And all of this is like interesting stuff, but they just didn't have much personality and depth to them, I think. I will definitely read others. Rachel Hawkins, she has a book coming out this year. It's like something, it's set in an Italian villa. Again, we're jumping between 2 timelines, like Rockstar and like his friends when they're in the past and one of them died, and then we're like jumping to present day where like a girl and her sister's there and they like one of them's trying to figure out what happened. Fun vibes to her books, certainly, but this was just kind of fine for me. Like I did enjoy it at times, but I also have a lot, you know, I don't think it's like the best by any means. I think I'd give it a 5 out of 10. I'm like pretty neutral. I don't think it's going to be that memorable for me. The audio narrator did a good job. She did a few different accents and stuff. I like the cover though. I think it's really fun. Then next up is Woman of Myth from Dear Woman and Mami Wata to Amaterasu and Athena, Your Guide to the Amazing and Diverse Women of World Mythology by Jenny Williamson and Jen McMenemy, creators of the Ancient History Fangirl podcast. That was a mouthful. Illustrated by Sarah Richard with a foreword by Liv Alberts. So obviously History Fangirl podcast, which I've heard of but I haven't actually listened to. I want to get into that one, and Miss Baby. They're on my radar. And as the title kind of says, this is a book about a bunch of different women from mythologies from all over the world. It's kind of broken down into 3 different categories. We have our goddesses, our heroines, and then our monsters. Also illustrated. Let's pull up some of my favourite illustrations for you. And the illustrations are just gorgeous. This one. I love this one. Each kind of woman has like a different, there's like a format that it kind of follows. Pronunciation, other names that they're known as, their appearance, symbols, an overview, and then a what's her story section, and then kind of like a little fun fact. It's kind of like a guide almost. It's a very quick overview to all these different characters and gods and women. I listened to the audiobook for this one as well, which was narrated by the authors, which I highly recommend. It's a very easy listening experience. I will say, I don't feel like it was designed to be read in the way that I read it necessarily, where I just kind of sat and read it straight through for a couple of days. It feels like one that you kind of need to dip in and out a little bit of because of that format it has. But I still enjoyed it on the whole and learned a lot. I actually finished this one and Reckless Girls both at the very beginning of the month. I read the majority of them in March, in fact. So I'm going to try and remember some of my favourite characters, but I don't think I'm going to be able to. Morgan Le Fay, hearing more about her story, was really interesting. Morgan as well was one that I only knew kind of bits about. Uitaka was a bunch of fun. I don't know. Maybe I'll like try and find some and put them on screen for you because I can't remember very well. I really like the kind of concept behind this. I love the fact that it's from like loads of different religions and mythologies and folklores from all around the world. Obviously it's only a very quick overview on each of them, but that's kind of the point, to get like as wide variety as possible. And there's so many in here that I had no idea, like I knew nothing about. There are a lot in here that I'd heard of but didn't know a lot about. It was fascinating. I definitely think I'll be returning to this. I definitely think I'll be doing more research into some of these individual women. I think it was really well written. Like I said, it was kind of humorous, and there's also a great amount of sensitivity there. They were very kind of aware of the fact that some of these women are still believed, you know, in active religions today, and they're still worshipped, and there was a lot of respect. There was also kind of, they're very aware about including people of different body sizes and races and ethnicities and genders and sexualities, and I loved their attention to detail in that aspect. Yeah, I think I'd give it a 9 out of 10, 8, 9 out of 10, something to that effect, only because like it's just a guide to all women. Like, while I think that's a great concept, it being a guide of all these different mythological women, also you can't sink your teeth into it in the way you would with other non-fiction books, but I really enjoyed this. I highly recommend it if it sounds at all interesting. And then next up was actually one of my most anticipated releases of the year, and that is Hell Breaks Loose by Derek Landy, which is part of the Skullduggery Pleasant series. I love the Skullduggery Pleasant series. It's one of my favourite series. I will leave a video link down below where I talk about it in more depth, so I don't have to do it here because I talk about it all the time. The latest installment is like a prequel book, 300 years before the story begins. And like I said, I absolutely love this series. Highly anticipated this. I have to say, I think it's my least favourite of this series, including like Armageddon Out of Here, the short story collection. Maybe is above the grimoire because I really struggle with the grimoire. Plot seems a little rushed to me. It didn't seem as fleshed out as I wanted to. And being that like it's canon, like I don't know if I love what went down in here. Like in my head I almost don't want to think about it as canon. Like it felt like a fun adventure for the sake of a fun adventure, like, but then it's also going to be messing up with our characters and what's happening. There's an element in here that I kind of is difficult to get right, and I don't know if I love how it was presented in this one. I think it's very much meant to just be like a fun side quest story type of book, and what I really wanted was like the dead men in action and like a story from then in the war, and it ended up not quite being that necessarily. The writing I found very different from his writing style normally. I think it's because he was trying to make it sound like old-fashioned. Came across as a little clunkier than it normally is. Also, we're kind of reading mostly from Ghastly's perspective, and it was a very matter-of-fact narration. Like, we never really got what he thought or felt or like history with him, like, oh yeah, this thing reminded me of this time, and you know, it was just very surface level feelings. That stuff I said just then about like it being canon, I really, when it first came out, I didn't love it. In the end, it was kind of fun. I think that element really helped me get through the book. But like I said, I wanted just like a story of the dead men in their past, kind of like the little one we got in Armageddon Out of Here, and that wasn't quite what it was. So it was really disappointing. I think I'd give it a 6 out of 10, like a 3 stars. Oh, that hurt. And then next up was the graphic novel that I read this month, which is Emma G Wildford by Zidro and Edith. This is a very quirky little graphic novel. It's hard to put into a genre almost. I'd say it's a mystery though. We're following Emma, and her fiance went out on an expedition and he hasn't come back. They've not heard from him. He's gone missing. Emma writes poetry. She's a poet, and her poetry often kind of gets infused with the storyline. It takes place in the 1920s, primarily kind of in summer. It's weird, it almost feels like this book has very two definitive halves to it, and I was really loving the first half. It kind of had this quirky, charming, mysterious vibe to it that I really loved. I really loved Emma as a character. The second half, I don't know if I loved it as much. It just didn't have the same vibe. I don't know. Maybe if I reread it I'd have different opinions with time, like, you know, letting it sink in. I still was charmed by it overall. I still really liked the character and I really liked the story. I think it was really well written, it was really well illustrated. I think I'm a little annoyed because in the beginning I was like, oh, this might be like a new favourite of mine, and I don't know if it is. But I really enjoyed it nonetheless. I think it's really good still. I'd just give it like a 9 out of 10. If it sounds intriguing, then I would recommend picking it up. It's a fun, quirky little read. And then next up was Wicked Temptation by Katie Robert, the third book in the Dark Olympus series. And actually I also read Radiant Sin, so I might as well just talk about that one as well while we're here. I audiobooked both of these. They're narrated by Zara Hampton Brown and Alex Moorcock. Kind of rated them very similar, but almost for like the opposite reason. It was interesting. So Wicked Temptation, we're following Helen, Achilles and Patroclus, which was a really interesting dynamic. Ares has recently died. I mean, he was kind of old in the first two, so this isn't the same massive spoiler. He died, and there's like a games to find the new Ares, and they're all competing in these games. So I really like that premise. I really like the games. I love those kinds of like premises, but they took up such a tiny amount of the book, and they were so quick. Even like the end like, you know, the big final showdown happened so quickly to me, and it was moving very slowly in the beginning. It took a really long time for this like premise to kick into gear. It took a long time for us to like begin the trials and to be in the first trial. Also, it took a really long time for the relationship to kind of get going, and for kind of that, you know, these are romance books if you didn't know, with like an Olympus twist to them. I'll link the video where I talk about the first one down below. It took a while for that part to get going. It was just really slow in the beginning. I kind of, once it kicked into gear, I definitely enjoyed it much more. I found the dynamic quite interesting, but I wasn't as invested as I was in the first two books. Also, like, there's a lot of internal monologues, and it happens in all of the books, but in these two it got to me. Like, I'd literally just like glaze over and it would go in one ear out the next. And then with Radiant Sin, it was kind of like the reverse. I really enjoyed the beginning, I enjoyed the premise, I enjoyed the characters. Maybe I enjoyed the premise less of this one actually. It's like following Apollo and Cassandra, and they go to a week-long party. It's fake dating, there's a lot of fake dating tropes in these books. And about halfway through I kind of got bored, and then I started listening to it on really quick speed to get through it. There is something that's introduced into this one and it's carried on in this one, and that will inevitably be carried on maybe even in the rest of the books now, and I'm really intrigued by that. Thing is, I think I read Katie Robert books for like the world and the characters and the plot and that's not their main appeal. Yeah, I just didn't enjoy them as I enjoyed the first two books. I think I'd give both of them 4s out of 10s. I will definitely read more in the series in the future. They're easy, fun reads. Maybe the fact that I read both of them in 1 month didn't help. Like I said, I'm intrigued by this like new premise type threat that we've got going on, so I'm intrigued to see where it goes. And then next up is the novella, which is Arch-Conspirator by Veronica Roth. I haven't read a Veronica Roth book since the Divergent trilogy, since Legion. I've been intrigued by the premises of some of them that's come out, but I've not gotten around to reading any of them. I saw it in Waterstones. I saw Veronica Roth and I was like, oh, what's this? And I was really intrigued by the colour. I love the colour scheme, like the red and the blue and then this bright yellow. I don't know if the yellow's translating on camera, but it's literally like a bright neon yellow with blue writing on the spine. It's a gorgeous book. I saw that it was Veronica Roth. I picked it up and I liked how pretty it was, and then I opened it up and saw Antigone, Oedipus and Jocasta, and that was that. I bought it. I didn't know that it was a sci-fi retelling kind of inspired by that myth, so that was a fun surprise. I actually audiobooked this one as well. It was narrated by Dion Graham and January Lavoie, and I really enjoyed the narration. I read a really big chunk of this book all in one kind of day in one sitting. It was hot outside and it's kind of set in like a desert-esque environment, and I really enjoyed that setting. I just think it was really well written, it was really clever, the writing was also very beautiful at times, the narration was great. I think it really had a lot going for it. I was really intrigued by it. I really enjoyed just the journey. I just think it was really well written. It was really clever. The writing was also very beautiful at times. The narration was great. I think it really had a lot going for it. I was really intrigued by it. I really enjoyed just the journey. I think I'm going to give this one a 9 out of 10. I think it was really strong. Praised by Olivia Blake and Max Gladstone. Yeah. I think if you're interested in it, definitely look into it. I don't know if I could like describe the premise to you. Outside the last city on Earth, the planet is a wasteland. Without the archive where the genes of the dead are stored, humanity will end. Antigone's parents, Oedipus and Jocasta, are dead. Passing into the archive should be a cause for celebration, but with her militant uncle Creon rising to claim her father's vacant throne, all Antigone feels is rage. There's a lot more to it than that. It's quite nuanced, and you kind of slowly realise what's going on with the world and why things are the way they are. It's very intriguing. Yeah, I think I'm going to give this one a 9 out of 10. I really enjoyed it. Speaking actually of Greek mythology retellings, the next book I finished was Stone Blind by Natalie Haynes. This was a really anticipated book for me last year, but I never got around to reading it. And I'm seeing Natalie Haynes talk about this book actually this month of May, later this month, and so I wanted to read it first. So I finally got round to it and I really enjoyed it. I actually filmed a reading vlog where I read this one and the next book that I'm going to talk about, and so I go into a lot more depth there. If you want to know my thoughts on this book, I highly recommend checking that video out because I really break my thoughts down. It will be the next video up after this one. I'll link it to the description when it is up. I had a very similar response to this one that I had with the other novel of hers I read, The Children of Jocasta. I have yet to read A Thousand Ships. The only other book by her that I read is Pandora's Jar, and that is one of my absolute favourite books of all time. So, but when I read The Children of Jocasta, I sat there and I kind of questioned everything for a while, like both in terms of like the plot and the characters and also the way it was written and the choices she made in that way. And I had the exact same thing with this one where at first I was like, I don't know, but then I would kind of like talk myself around in circles into why I actually thought it was really clever and really well done. So on the whole, I really enjoyed this. I did genuinely really enjoy the reading experience, and I do think it was very cleverly done. Please watch that video if you want to hear more. I talk about it a lot more. I'm gonna give this one a 9 out of 10, I think. I wish this was like raised. I feel like it looks so flat in comparison to the, you know, the gold writing. Next up was Agatha Christie's Sinister Spring. This is a collection of short stories from Agatha Christie, all centered around the idea of either spring or like if there's gardening kind of involved, then they'll be thrown in. If it can be linked into spring somehow, then it will be in here. Got 3 more for the other seasons, like Midsummer Mysteries, I think this one's called. I'm definitely going to be reading those. I enjoyed this a lot more than I initially thought I would. I audiobooked this one as well. It was narrated by a few different narrators, so I'll leave them on screen. Really enjoyed the audiobook and the narration, and I'll definitely be audiobooking the rest of them. We have a few different mysteries in here. We have a couple Poirot, a few Maple, we have a Tommy and Tuppence, which I absolutely loved, a couple others. I think on the whole the Poirot ones were generally my favourite, and a couple of Marples were also quite good. I think those ones of the collection tended to be my favourites versus the kind of more random ones. It was just a fun little collection. I think I'd give it a 7 out of 10. It's also a stunning edition. Look at the cover. I love the foiling. It's so shiny. I cannot wait to get my hands on the rest of them. And then next up is another kind of like on the whim book, and that is Mary Beard's Women in Power. I've been wanting to read this one for a little while. It's called like a manifesto. What it really is it's 2 speeches, maybe 3 at a push, that Mary Beard gave kind of adapted into a non-fiction book. I listened to this one as well. It's like 3 hours long and it was narrated by the author. Maybe even actually, I think it was only an hour long. I listened to it while I cleaned, and the audiobook was great. I really enjoyed it on the whole. On the whole, I think it was really clever. I do agree with some other reviews that to call it a manifesto is kind of bold, being that it is like 2 kind of speeches kind of adapted into essays. I think that's more of like a marketing issue though, maybe. I don't know. It was interesting and it made me question a lot of things, and I definitely think this is one I'm going to re-listen to again in the future. Mainly I just wanted more because it was so interesting. I thought kind of definitely the way the first one went, it was very focused in on the public voice of women, kind of adopting that style and like focusing on these like smaller aspects of the way that our society is misogynistic, really exploring them in like the classic world versus our world and drawing those parallels. I really like that format. I wanted more of it. Yeah, that's my only really qualm with it though. I think I'd give it like an 8 out of 10. Tea break. I'm very stressed. My dogs have been driving me crazy all morning. I feel like I've just like rushed through my thoughts. And then the last book that I have to talk about today is Athena, the Story of a Goddess by Imogen and Isabel Greenberg. Isabel also wrote The 100 Nights of Heroes and The Encyclopedia of Early Days and Glass Towns, all of which graphic novels that I love. The 100 Nights of Heroes is actually one of my ultimate favourite graphic novels. This is actually like a children's picture book. True to form, illustrations were absolutely gorgeous and stunning, and I love her illustration style. I really liked the way like she interpreted a lot of things and like made things look like old Greek looking, like on the vases and in that kind of style. Don't know if I have too many thoughts on it overall. It definitely made me think more about the way we sanitize our like myths for children. There were a couple of decisions that were made that I thought were questionable. I think, like for instance, we have Athena's kind of origin, funnily enough, and it talks about how he like Zeus made the world and then all of a sudden out of nowhere, completely out of nowhere, he had a headache, and that's not how Athena came to be. Maybe it is in some versions. The only version that like I've only ever heard this version of events, that Zeus raped Metis, another god, and then consumed her. Consuming her, he also like consumed unborn Athena who was inside Metis, and then like Athena popped out, kind of the same way that it does in here. Rather than just saying like out of completely nowhere, nothing happened, he just all of a sudden got a headache, why don't we just say like Zeus had a headache? Just don't say where it came from. I think that's where it gets a little questionable for me, because then later on when like you learn the real versions of these myths, it's kind of confusing. There's a lot of justifying the god's behaviour, and I think it's to get that like moral of the story out of it. Like Athena ends up being good and friends with Hera and Aphrodite, and she learns her lessons that gods should be kind to mortals and they shouldn't be like playing with the mortals for their own fun and games. Like Zeus tells Athena this at one point, and Zeus is the king of playing with the mortals' lives for his own entertainment and like raping women left, right and centre. Like it's so far from what the gods actually do that it kind of made me feel a little uncomfortable at times. It's definitely made me think about it a lot though, because I think even when I was a kid, like I didn't necessarily think the gods loved us. Like I knew that they were like uncool towards humans. Yeah, it was interesting. I enjoyed the experience on the whole still. I don't know if I can necessarily rate it though. That's kind of a weird end to this video. I'd really love to hear if you read any of these, what your thoughts were, what were your favourite books that you read last month. And that is everything that I have for this video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have an amazing morning, afternoon, evening / night. My name's Jade. I hope I see you again next time. Goodbye!